please stand for the pledge?
Yep.
Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right, we'll start with the public portion. Sarah Davison.
Could you push the screen? Is that part of your presentation?
It's going to follow my presentation.
Yeah, it's going to have to come back in order to be on camera. Thanks.
Where do you want it?
This way.
Yeah,
Got to come back in the camera view behind the beam.
that should do it, right?
Good?
In front of the beam's off the camera.
I'll ask.
All right, well, hello, everybody, and thanks for,
You need the mic. Microphone.
is it this one?
Yep. Sorry about that.
I'm sorry. Okay, let's start again. Sarah Davison, Friends of Georgia Capon Foundation. Great to be here today. I wanted to just go over a couple of things real quick before I introduced Ray Hinkle, who is an expert in Phragmites. As most of you know, the harvester has been on the pond for 2 weeks, and they're doing a really great job. We're very pleased with the new vendor, and we're getting some really good harvest. Unfortunately, we did get a late start, and a blue-green bloom is developing on the pond, as I'm sure most of you heard was announced on Friday. So to that end, to bring the trustee resolution together with the town's resolution authorizing the harvester, our dates are not the same. So Francis had suggested that we amend the original trustee resolution that was voted on you all on April 9th to bring the dates into conformance. And there were a few typos in it as well that we fixed. So Arlene, you have the revised? Yeah. Okay. Can we adopt this so that...
I have it here? I don't see it. Okay.
So the new dates, to allow for a little more time, is to conclude the harvester on September 15th and conclude the aluminum skiff, Dr. Peterson's work, on September 30th. In the original resolution, it was to end in August.
You want to do it? Fine.
You know, keeping in mind you got off to a late start,
Right.
correct?
Right.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that personally.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
Is everybody okay with the extension of time?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah?
So make a motion.
So,
Well, he's going to read it.
yeah, okay,
So I'm
good.
going to read the resolution into the record.
Please
if that's
do.
okay. The following resolution was offered by Rick Drew, and whereas due to serious water quality impairments that are a threat to human and environmental health at Georgia Pond and the continued growth of blue-green algae, which is promoting nitrogen and phosphorus found in the pond, and whereas there is a need for a continued survey of the blue crab and fish populations in Georgia Pond, whereas a permit has been received by the Friends of Georgia Pond Foundation, Inc., and Dr. Christopher Gobler from SUNY Stony Brook to harvest the macroalgae in Georgia Pond, and the trustees have been named as property owners. Whereas the trustees and the town board have agreed to permit the use of an aquatic marine harvester and skiff boat with an order trawl, and where said harvester will be allowed to operate in Georgia Pond for 5 days a week, Monday to Friday, for a total of 7.5 hours a day, from the months of June 2018 to September 15th, 2018, and the skiff boat is to operate periodically until September 30th, 2018. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Friends of Georgia Pond Foundation, Inc. shall be permitted to use the aquatic marine harvester to harvest the macroalgae and a skiff boat with or without an otter trawl to survey blue crab and fish populations from Monday to Friday from June 2018 to September 15, 2018.
Do I have a
Well,
second?
it should be September 30th at the end there for the skiff the harvester's going to stop on September 15th, and the skiff is going to stop on September 30th.
Okay. So the skiff boat will operate until September 30th,
Yeah.
as corrected. Do I have a second?
I will second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Now it's my great pleasure to introduce Ray Hinkle to you. This man knows a lot about Phragmites australis, the common reedgrass. In fact, he knows so much about it, and he's so into this grass that his license plate says Frag. I don't know if you noticed it out.
TMI.
So Friends of Georgia Capon Foundation hired Ray to do a baseline overview of Phragmites at the pond. I hand-delivered to each of you a report, his report summarizing his findings. And, we just thought it'd be good to have Ray here to give you a very quick overview and be available for questions as we go forward. I know the board spends a lot of time with Phragmites permits on the pond, and I think there's things that we can look to in the future working together to help manage that situation. We'll never eradicate Phragmites from the pond, but to manage it and instead encourage the native, diverse marsh that we'd all like to see there. So here's Ray Hinkle.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you all so very much. A pleasure to be here this evening and talk about my favorite subject, which indeed, is Phragmites. Just in the way of summary, I've been working, on restoring Phragmites dominated areas for more than 25 years. Have tried literally every approach you can almost think of, from using goats to, consume it, to applying various types of cutting at many frequencies during a given year, using a technique we call microtopography, where you actually go in and break up the rhizomes and hopefully get the stuff to kind of die on its own or wash away. And then also herbicides as well. So the full sort of scheme of opportunities there are out there to control Phragmites. I became involved first, with Georgia Pond a number of years ago, whenever there was a conference down in southern New Jersey called Phragmites, a sheep in wolf's clothing, meaning that, there were a lot of opinions about what Phragmites is and how important it is. But it brought to focus, a lot of folks, and indeed, some representatives of Georgia Pond landowners went to this conference because even back then it was an issue. So, I started my involvement sort of through that conference, and coming out here to the area and greatly appreciating now, the problem that faces the town in controlling Phragmites. As I've now looked at that situation in great detail, through field work and review of existing information relating to the pond. And tonight we'll just talk a little bit about what we've found and what our thoughts are in terms of moving ahead that I think will help in terms of bringing greater focus and greater success to controlling Phragmites. I can advance this.
So, you want to put it there?
So, the report, you've seen, is maybe not the typical Georgia Pond shoreline, but, it certainly represents the problem in terms of its encroachment along the shoreline, which has not always been the case. Those of you who've been residents here for decades, know that decades ago, that was not the situation. And in the report, is a historic black and white photo taken in the 50s of the pond. And, while it's, you can't discern every detail of the shoreline here, Bruce Horwath and I talking a little bit before the meeting here, think that largely there was exposed sandbars along the pond, not that much vegetation perhaps. But the invasive type of Phragmites that's present now, which is a European origins, loves to invade bare, exposed soils. And it would have been a perfect place for seeds to get deposited and initiate and to become established. So it's not that long that Phragmites has been here in reality. And it has very rapidly advanced. What we tried to do was to quantify the current conditions, and in a map that's included in the report and shown here in very small scale, but these sort of pinkish areas on the map are areas of what we'll call monotypic Phragmites, meaning not much else is growing there. Solid stands of Phragmites upwards of 10 to 15 feet in height. And there are some fairly extensive stands, as you can see by the areas of that color. We've also indicated on the map areas where there's been restoration, where there's hardened shorelines, because there are some areas of the pond that have bulkheads and other riprap or other hard edges. So there's a lot of diversity in the pond, just due to individual landowner actions, whether they've done nothing and the Phragmites is there in dominance, or where they've done restoration, and it can vary in terms of what type has been done. So there's a real mixed result in terms of any efforts to control it, because everybody is sort of doing their own thing. What we do know from having done the mapping and the field work related to it is that about 60% of the shoreline is currently now invaded by Phragmites or common reed. The land coverage of that is about 29, 30 acres, or about 10% of the pond area that is now supporting Phragmites. We were certain to call this invasive Phragmites, so we wanted to be certain, so we did a genetic analysis on samples we collected from the pond, sent them to a laboratory for genetic fingerprinting, and they all match up to the invasive European type Phragmites. So it is that specific genotype, as it's called. There is a native Phragmites that also occurs very locally. We don't believe there's any on Long Island. There are some stands of it elsewhere in New York State, and I've seen it in Delaware, where it occurs in small pockets and is actually being protected to preserve it because it's a very limited species at this time. It prefers brackish water, so the salinity of Georgica Pond is really ideal for it, and that's a contributing factor to the reason why it's been so aggressive. It can compete or outcompete a lot of the native species in that environment. One of the options to control Phragmites is to increase the salinity. If the salinity were at, say, 20 parts per thousand, it would be a controlling factor, and it would curtail the growth of Phragmites. If nothing is done, if Phragmites is allowed to essentially continue its growth pattern as it's been, we're estimating that in the next 25 years, it could expand from 10% to as much as 30% of the land area, given the topography or the bathymetry of the pond bottom and the rate at which it's spreading. So it can only get worse without a dedicated effort to control it. And certainly the creeks and coves, Talmadge, Seabury, Jones, Goose Creek, Eel Cove, and Georgica Cove, are the vulnerable areas of the pond, and that they could easily be cut off from the main body of the pond. because of the shallowness and the fact that there already are pretty extensive stands of Phragmites bordering those areas. The recommendations, we've got, there are a lot of methods available to control frag. There's been a lot of mowing done around the pond. It does have an effect. It robs the plant of the ability to make and store nutrients over a season. It's a very resilient species, and it is a grass, so it tends to grow back like any grass would. It redevelops, regrows, in greater numbers of stems, maybe smaller in height, but it definitely grows back. In cases where we've tried mowing as many as 5 times a year, and then when those areas were left after a period of treating that for 2 or 3 years, they grew back to essentially the same type of stand that had been there originally. So it's a difficult task to control by just mowing. And one of the sort of limiting factors is that the New York State DEC sets some limits on the height to which Phragmites can be cut in this region, and they're essentially trying to protect lower growing vegetation by saying you can't cut any lower than say 6 inches above the surface. One of the controlling factors that's coming to be understood is that by flooding Phragmites all the way to the base, you cut off a airflow pattern that Phragmites is able to use to aerate its rhizomes. It actually pumps air from down the stem through the rhizome and up another stem to keep its rhizome aerated. And there's been some recent studies done to show that by covering those cut stems with water, which could be done when the pond was let and then cut and then flooded, you'd effectively be able to cut off that airflow and possibly add to some success in the mowing process. And working to get DEC to perhaps, allow that would be one of the objectives we might seek to pursue. Removal has been done on the pond as well, excavation and rhizome removal, which of course, is effective if the rhizome removal is done, to completeness, and there aren't fragments left behind. Fortunately, in a relative sense, the rhizome depth of the Phragmites stands, from what limited exploration we did, is not as great as some areas, so that getting the Phragmites out through excavation is not an impossible job. There are some areas where it's down 6 to 8 feet, and in those cases, excavation, is pretty impractical. And what we'd like to see, going forward is to sort of look at a 5-year plan of sorts where we would implement a cutting plan as a minimum, since that is what most landowners are willing to pursue, to essentially get DEC to buy in on the lower cutting levels, and see if, in effect, through a consolidated effort, we can demonstrate some greater success than perhaps we've seen with the sort of individual efforts that have been done so far. So to get sort of the town trustees behind this and support it, and really kind of push for a management plan approach to controlling Phragmites going forward. And just, we did a few, put a few photographs here, but on the report, additional ones which show, various conditions from full Phragmites coverage with no treatment to areas where it's been cut, where it's, growing back, and other areas where it's been painstakingly removed. Some owners are very diligent about removing it, either pulling or otherwise, cutting relentlessly cutting, I guess I'd say, and also then excavation where rhizomes have been removed and replanting has been done to establish the type of diverse marsh that would be a benefit to the ecology of the pond, and would likewise remove nutrients, as does Phragmites, but it would be a much better type of marsh to have around the pond than the Phragmites marsh. So we'd like to help in that regard, and certainly the Friends of Georgica Pond are supportive of promoting this approach and working with you all to do that.
Right. Have any of these methods been used by you in New York State?
Yes. For New York State DEC, we did a excavation on Staten Island for what's called Bridge Creek, where a tidal wetland was dominated by Phragmites, and a excavator was brought in and removed about 18 inches to 2 feet of rhizome and sediment, and that has been a pretty successful project.
Have you used the cut and drown method?
We've not had the opportunity to do that because DEC's position on that. I don't know, Bruce, if you've had any experience with cutting it lower than the restricted level?
Really, we started, about 5 years ago, when they were allowing that, but the regulations will change as we go.
Yeah, Ray, they did years ago. Maidstone Golf Club did a sort of a pilot program where they initially mowed and continued to mow at like 6 inches, and they did it. I think they did it over about 4 years. That they were pretty disciplined at it, and it was amazing how these stands that would look like they were monocultures of Phragmites. First year it was just stubble. Second year, you saw a smattering of a few iris versicolor and some old cinnamon fern and stuff came back. But by the third year, it was a pretty dramatic change. The number of stems began to reduce dramatically. And, it's pretty intuitive that by the DEC's regulation, to cut at this 18 inches, it's counterproductive.
Right.
I mean, the fact of the matter is, if you cut it as tight, to 4 to 6 inches, which I think is what you were doing originally, right, Bruce? If there's something coming back, well, as time goes on, you can see it, you can avoid it. At this 18-inch height, if there's something coming back, it's pretty unlikely that it's ever going to make it above that canopy of Phragmites. And they seem to be pretty comfortable at existing at 18 inches. I mean, they're, it's sad. And I don't know whether, Sarah, I don't know whether maybe if we joined you, maybe we could get some sort of a sit-down with the DEC, where maybe we can get them to revisit that rule, because it's not working. And it's not just on Georgica Pond. They've applied it to some other areas, and clearly it's not having the results that...
Well, this recent literature, I think, will be supportive of the argument, and just educating them as to the results of these studies with regard to the snorkeling effect. And with the letting of the pond, I mean, you almost have the perfect situation.
Well, we have the same. So we do some projects over in Southampton where we cut Phragmites and that, and we try and time our cuts to when they're
you know, when Mecox is let.
Yeah.
And it works pretty good.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's you know, the first cut, it looks like you've done the greatest job in the
Yeah.
world until you get that first blast of warm weather. And then it comes up pretty thick, but we don't let it get any more than about maybe 2 foot tall. We cut them as close as we're allowed to cut them. But
Well, that's the other thing, is the frequency, too, to get an agreement from them that, you know, the limits on frequency, you know, I think Bruce is saying, you know, 2 times, 4 times,
it's as needed.
you know, yeah, it is. It should be, when it reaches a certain height, you know, you have the ability to go in and cut again, as opposed to a number of times per season or whatever. You know, keep robbing it of its energy and ability to store energy. You really basically have to starve it out, which is what you're doing.
I guess the frequent cutting makes it use a lot more nitrogen, right? Absorbs.
It would, well, if you crop it, and then, of course, what do you do with what you cut? I mean, that's the other thing.
Well, it has to go away, yeah.
Yeah. You know, ideally, you know, you're removing that biomass and you're removing nitrogen and other, you know, nutrients in the process. It's not like your lawn where you want to use your mulching mower and feed your lawn, and you know, if you can, you want to get that stuff out of there.
Yeah. I mean, on Georgia, there's one of the aerials that you showed. There's already one little freshwater pond that was a great little puddle duck spot that's been gone for years, you know, because it's the whole, you know, the ground's been raised up by the Phragmites, you know, even if you cut the Phragmites, there's no pond there anymore.
Right. And there are, you know, there are a lot of native species that are like just waiting for the chance. I mean, you know, Spartina pectinata is just abundant where it can get started and grow, and it's a beautiful, you know, marginal, you know, wetland species that is there's seed source, there's
there's plenty of it around the pond.
yeah, it just needs some daylight, but yeah, it could be a diverse marsh again, it really could. Great. Well, appreciate the opportunity again, and look forward to seeing success.
I was just thinking that, you know, I don't think it has to be in the way of a resolution, but I was thinking that there's enough new information, or at least compilation of information, and enough regulatory agencies that are like-minded that it'd be worth coordinating, not to sit down with DC, but actually put it together in the form of a report and request that asks for some standardization, and for them to have to justify criteria that nobody else seems to understand or agree with.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Okay, Billy Hajack?
Good evening, members of the board. This is an request for a staircase. It's a small staircase at 29 Spring Woodway. It just allows the owner pedestrian access from his property down to 3 Mile Harbor. I don't know if anybody's had a chance to look at the plan or...
I did,
Okay.
and I concur with you. I don't think it belongs here because it's not on trustee property, correct?
It's, well, I'm not exactly sure. We've submitted the application. It's entirely on his property.
Right.
It is landward of the mean high water mark. You know, we've applied for a town natural resources permit. Our suspicion is that the building department is going to ask for a trustee permit, so we've applied to you.
Hey, Billy,
Whether or
is there
not-
part of this stairway that basically sets down onto the beach?
I don't know if I guess you could, I guess by
Because
town...
that's what's going to put it in.
Well, by town definition, the beach begins at the toe of a bluff. The town has defined this as a bluff. I'm not really sure it's a bluff, but it's a slope. So, yeah, you could argue that part of it is on a beach. So,
Do we have an application from you now?
yes, I've submitted an application and a plan.
I have it, yeah.
Yeah, it's a 4-foot wide staircase. It's about 25 feet long.
All right, so that's within what Brian's going to ask for.
Yeah, it meets the...
On the ZBA.
Yeah.
Hey,
And unfortunately, it's slightly elevated to comply with the DEC's requirements.
And what's the surface material? Is this open grate?
It's going to be it's going to be an open grate deck or decking, staircase, treads, and then it's going to be hardwood, no treated materials.
All right, where are you at with ZBA right now?
We've just submitted the application, so.
Can we take a little time here?
Sure.
Do you have DEC permits on this yet?
No, we've just applied we applied to everybody all at once, so.
Bill, is there a bulkhead in front of the property?
No.
No.
All right.
No, I think 2 doors down there's a cement, there's like a cement bulkhead with a staircase.
Is this a fixed staircase?
Yes.
So it doesn't pull up during the winter for storage or anything?
No, it would be fixed. Yeah.
But is there a stair off of this boardwalk that goes down, that's going to basically set down on the beach?
The stairs are just going to land onto the beach.
Okay. Would it be, are there any tides that get up above this thing? 'Cause if there are, you know, we
yeah.
typically ask for a drop-down aluminum stair. They're not expensive, and you know what it does do? It saves a lot of wear and tear on your boardwalk.
Mhm.
Is there erosion at the toe of this block?
I don't think, it's not erosion from wave energy. It's probably erosion from rain, where it's kind of bare soil. So I think the erosion is the water, is the rainwater. It's not, there's no erosion from wave energy here. It's not that kind of a bluff. It's pretty well vegetated, actually.
It's drainage?
I think so, yeah. I think it's like splash erosion on the face of the
Is
block.
this Springwood?
Guys, what we've done on some of these is, being that he's doing the shotgun technique here, and he's applying to everybody, is rather than pass judgment on this thing tonight, what I would suggest is maybe that we table it for the time being. You get DEC permit or you get ZBA permit, come back. Because if we pass judgment on this tonight, he goes through the process. If he finds himself having to modify his application, technically he's supposed to come back to us with a modification. And I think it sounds like this board would be in agreement to that.
Sounds reasonable and the right way.
Rather than have you adjust your documentation when you get one of the other permits, just
Come back. Okay.
Fair enough?
Sounds fine. Yep.
More streamlined for everybody,
Okay.
right?
Yeah, if you have any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them about it.
This is Springwood, right?
Yes,
Springwood?
29 Spring Woodway.
Mhm.
Yep. You can go there, there's actually you can visit the site if you want. He put a ladder, temporarily put a ladder so he can get down the slope.
Springwood? No, it's not.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you. East Hampton.
All right, Mike McDonald?
I can't think of the name of the road, isn't it? Is it real estate broker? No. It's all through.
Thank you very much. Good to be here with you. So I do a lot of work in resilience, and I'm very interested in the future of the resilience of this area, living on 307 Kings Point Road, and looking at what we still have as a pretty pristine environment going forward into the future with some potentially serious problems. I started out, first of all, we have to move into renewable energy to deal with climate change. It's not a question about that. And I'm also a supporter of wind power. And I was a supporter of deep water wind to begin with. When I was just looking at the materials that were presented, it sounds very good in terms of dealing with peak demand, 100% renewable, addressing East Hampton's policy for 100% renewable energy. But as I started actually looking at the details, it was pretty alarming what I was finding in terms of the difference between the actual facts and what had been promoted in this program for deep water wind. So I want to just talk about some of the concerns that I have, and I think some of the unique concerns about the trustees' mandate to deal with coastal environment and what this project actually means in terms of your mandate. And I think also what you're being asked to do, which in short, I think, is to support a project without doing appropriate due diligence. So I would just ask that you actually look at the details. You got to scratch beneath the surface of this project to understand what it really is. So I think if they were delivering a solution to peak demand, that would be great. They're not doing that. In reality, the hottest days of the year have essentially no wind, so this is not a solution for peak demand. And that was the purpose of the South Fork RFP, was to provide a no-wires solution to peak demand. That was the purpose of the South Fork RFP. In reality, Deepwater Wind was the only bidder, the only wind bidder. In addition to being the only bidder, their partner of about 10 years, PSIG, actually was the evaluator of the only bidder. Okay, so there's a problem both in terms of antitrust issues and ethical concerns in regards to a business partner evaluating the only bidder of this South Fork RFP. It began to give a very different feeling where I was getting extremely uncomfortable about what this is looking like. Then we started looking at the economics of it. There is actually the cost of Deepwater Wind and its infrastructure, but then what we found out is that there's also a very extensive cost of transmission lines, which was not part of the South Fork RFP, and the South Fork RFP was supposed to mitigate having any transmission lines. So now you've got a project that goes up to about $1.6 billion. Okay, very expensive project for what they said was 90 megawatts of power. But in fact, when you start scratching the surface of it, it's not 90 megawatts of power. It's functionally about 37 megawatts of power at maximum. But then it's a variable energy source. So it's not even going to reach that 37 megawatt potential. So the cost is now extraordinarily expensive for a kilowatt per hour cost for the ratepayer. And the nature of the project is that the ratepayer, whether this is a successful project or not, once accepted and built, we're paying for a fixed price bid over 20 years at what we think is between 22 and 26 cents a kilowatt hour. Okay? When you look at where after 20 years, the competing wind projects, all of which that are being built out in Mid-Atlantic and in the Northeast, they all are competitive bids, including ones with Deepwater Wind. And if you look at the costs of Deepwater Wind in those competitive bids elsewhere versus this particular project here, they're much less expensive. So the cost after 20 years of the drop in price of wind is expected to go down to about 6 cents a kilowatt hour. And yet we're going to be paying still roughly 22 to 26 cents per kilowatt hour in a fixed price bid. Why would we do a fixed price bid? Why would we accept a non-competitive bid when all of the other bids are competitive? It doesn't make sense. So what I'm concerned about is that there are also a lot of irregularities in how the town board has managed this process of voting now in a split vote, 3-2, to support Deepwater Wind without doing appropriate due diligence. And in addition to that, putting out public statements that say that there is no environmental concerns about Deepwater Wind. How can they possibly say that? Okay, they have not gone through Article 7. They've not gone through SECRA. and Deepwater Wind has not even delivered the environmental statements that they stated they would. So my concern is that this is an extraordinary boondoggle for the the financial group that's behind this, and it also is from PSEG's point of view, a great project. They're going to get paid the 15% on capital development one way or the other. But who's holding the bag? It's going to be the ratepayers. The other problem that we have is that it leads to a type of commitment of massive amounts of capital for energy development that could end up as a stranded asset. If you look at the numbers, it could actually be a worse problem than what we are now holding in terms of continue to hold as the debt of the Shoreham nuclear power plant. In 15 years, I was told by Rocky Mountain Institute and separately by the leader of the Puerto Rico Resilient Power Puerto Rico, that they were putting microgrids into Puerto Rico, that we're going to be largely solar and battery and other forms of distributed energy within about 15 years. And Deepwater Wind, if you go from Boehm's timeline, it won't start until 2026, and that means that most likely they only have about a 6-year or maybe 10-year window to be able to pay off that investment in the central infrastructure, which is no longer going to be actually needed. It's a stranded asset that will leave the ratepayers with billions of dollars of cost. So my suggestion is don't buy the propaganda, start scratching beneath the surface and look at what you're actually needing to vote on. And at a minimum, if there's any division in your decision-making on this, just let it go to the normal process of due diligence, which is through Article 7 and SECRA. Then, if it comes out as it looks clean from an environmental point of view, it makes sense from the other dimensions of the analysis, then I think you can safely vote on this. But otherwise, I don't think you're really doing your due diligence for the residents of East Hampton. So thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Michael.
Tom Burloff.
No, I was this morning had to play with a new gadget. It was a podium. If you stepped on it, it would come up higher, and it worked very nicely. I have been somewhat puzzled by statements that have been made over the last several months about process and process for approving not Deepwater Wind. It is not East Hampton Town or Trustees' responsibility to approve Deepwater Wind. Deepwater Wind is part of a federal lease. It's a little part of that, 15 turbines. And that approval process, or what's called the construction and operations plan, hasn't started yet. BOEM, the Bureau of Energy Management, says that, well, they may be able to start building something in 2026. Deepwater says 2022. Don't know how they square those numbers. However, what I want to talk about is process, and I want to talk about Article 7. Article 7 is a very basic New York State process for approving major transmission systems. That's what's on the agenda. We're talking about approving a transmission system that goes from the boundary between federal and state waters, about 3 miles out, goes across some rights of way, and then we're talking about a substation that has to be built in East Hampton. That's what Article 7 handles. That's all. It's a major it's an approval for a major transmission system. Certainly, if you disapprove it, if you don't want it, then you may have an effect on making deep water not happen. There could be other routes. However, Article 7 has been terribly misconstrued repeatedly, and I think I did listen to the town board proceeding the other day, and there's just mass confusion. There is, by the way, in Article 7 going on right now in Nassau County, a similar project. It doesn't involve any beach property. It involves the right-of-way of a 138 kilovolt transmission line in Nassau County. You can go to the Public Service Commission website and look it up. You can follow it step by step to see what it is. There's also a famous case of Article 7 that started in New York in around 2000, 2001, called the cross-sound cable. That's a cable system that comes in from Connecticut. It's very similar to what's at hand in this case, and that is it's a 138 kilovolt cable. Actually, this one will probably be a little higher than that. So it requires state review. Now, why the town of East Hampton doesn't understand the process, and wants to do pre-approvals before a negotiation. I don't know, those of us who have been in the business of dealing with negotiations, that's something you never do. You never pre-approve before you go into a negotiation. Article 7 will happen, and the town board knows that very well. I was just given a document from the commission. It's actually an application for a Mr. Gordian Rocket to be an intervener in the cross-sound case, which was approved. So at least the Sustainability Committee of the town of East Hampton is intimately familiar with Article 7. There's no excuse for what I think is obfuscation and misstatements. I have the application here, and I have the active party list for that case. So when the town board acts as if, well, they don't really know what's involved in the process, that's not credible. Can I leave that here? I do agree, by the way, with Mr. Mike McDonald that there are some very serious issues about this project. The economics may not even work without extensive upgrades to the transmission system. I'm not going to get into that today, but I'm going to give you a write-up I did. East Hampton is a load pocket. Load pocket means that if you put something that varies a lot into it, like an offshore wind farm, you need to have something that compensates for that variation. And that's it's a number of variables: voltage, it could be the frequency, it could be the phase, it could be the amount of power generated. It is not conceivable that you could successfully run deep water wind into East Hampton and disconnect. We're talking about 100% renewable energy from deep water. Well, that means disconnecting from the system. It wouldn't work. You would have blackouts all the time. I understand why PSEG came up with a design of that kind. They've never done this before. Some of us have done this in Europe, and we know where the pitfalls are and what the problems are. So before I came here today, I sort of was debating with myself, maybe I should just say, go ahead and do it and let it fail. But then someone said, no, you can't do that, because if you look at LIPA's budget, there's $500 million in transmission upgrades. That'll fix it. Sure enough, it will fix it. But if you do the $500 million of transmission upgrades, you don't need deep water. That's the dilemma. That's a serious issue. So I did write a piece for you, 4 pages long. I'm not going to go through it. And it has also an analysis of what I think deep water is doing by obfuscating Article 7. It's on pages 3 and 4. But I'll leave this with you. Rather than bother you with my analysis, talking about it and spending a lot of time, you can read it. It's pretty damning stuff. So just to familiarize you a little bit with what Article 7 is, it's a fairly simple process. And one of the advantages of it is it's an open process. It begins as a public process. It's initiated. Well, actually what happens is that the administrative law judges or other people will come down from Albany, and they will hold seminars. They'll tell you how Article 7 happens. Step 1, very simple, is called a public statement hearing. Anyone who is affected by this or has an opinion can actually go to the public statement hearing, make a statement for the record. It will be part of the record of that proceeding. Why is that important? It's very important because it takes away the perception that there's funny business going on, that people are being kept in the dark. It takes away the perception of secrecy. And the judges pay attention to it. I've seen it. It's very important when you are a public body and you're making policy decisions, that those decisions are perceived to be fair and just. The second there is, in this particular case, we noticed back in, I think it was 2015, there was a requirement by PSE&G that board members, I know in Southampton, I don't know about East Hampton, but I know intimately about Southampton, were required to sign non-disclosure agreements by PSEG, the business partner of Deepwater. How could that happen? I said, most of today in a New York State proceeding that was really concerned about openness, was concerned about competition and getting the best price. When the state came up with its plans and procedures for implementing offshore wind, offshore wind is going to be implemented at massive scale in New York. And that's good. I support that. LIPA didn't want to play. There's an exception for LIPA. LIPA actually refused to play. And they have the option of rolling their own. They don't have to be doing it the way that the state does it. That's something you should think about. So the first step of Article 7 is a public statement hearing. Usually takes an evening, could be 2. And it's a good way to get things started. It's open, it's handled openly. Then a few days, maybe weeks go by, and there is a procedural conference, and a major decision is made. If there's very little controversy, essentially the case goes into a private negotiation. There's a downside to private negotiation for reasons that are valid. They're confidential. So, for example, it's conceivable that negotiation with Deepwater would become private. At the end, you of course have to come out of that negotiation. If there's an agreement, the judge has to resolve all of those issues. On the other hand, if it's controversial, there will be an evidentiary hearing where all parties can participate. And maybe this is the crux. The evidentiary hearing and parties who participate in Article 7 are afforded funds. To hire lawyers, I guess. There's some discussion about whether you can hire specialists or lawyers, experts, whatever. But there is money that is being spent in New York State to ensure that this process is open, fair, and in the end, when the Article 7 certificate is granted, which is not the end of the road, then people will agree that this was the right way to go. And maybe the problem why Deepwater doesn't like it is that they pay for it. Those funds come from Deepwater. It's not a lot, maybe 100,000, maybe 50, maybe 150, depends on a number of conditions. But anyway, this is not something to be afraid of. It's common in New York State. There is an Article 7 proceeding going on in NASA right now. There's a famous case that representatives from the East Hampton Sustainability Committee participated in on the Cross-Sound Cable project. And it's the right way to go. Then you can end, at the end of the day, everything will be clear and you can come to an agreement that's final, and I don't think anyone will object to it. as it's going right now, and what I read in the resolution by the town board, this is controversial. It's going to become more controversial, and it's going to live with you for a very, very long time if this project turns out not to be the proper thing to have done. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Patrice Dalton? Well, somebody put your name on the list.
Welcome.
Hi, Patrice. I am in the process of working on an article for the Audubon Society magazine, the Osprey magazine, on the impacts of the South Fork Wind Farm on birds and bats.
Could you take the microphone down a little?
How do you do that?
Just bend it. You got it. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you. Yeah, so on the, they are actually voting tonight on their position, they're having a board meeting on position on this matter, but I wanted to just make you aware of what's actually on the New York State literature on the bird and bat study, which is part of the Offshore Wind Master Plan. It's a huge document, but it's actually quite good. And it has an inventory of all the birds that are known to inhabit or to be present in the area where the wind farm will be. And it also contains a list of what seasons they are there, what type of bird they are, the height that they fly at, and they do a pretty thorough inventory. And they talk about the potential for harm to these birds. And the first is collision with the turbine. So in the event that the bird flies at the same height as the turbine, and if the birds are gregarious in nature, so they fly in flocks, and they're flying to feed, they're sort of approximately at the level of the water, the impact to those birds is particularly significant in terms of collision with the turbines. So they go through, of the 20, I think there's 39 birds that, I don't have the table with me, I did distribute it, but there are 39 bird species that are known to be present. Only one of them is not likely to impact or collide with the turbines. Then the second problem is that there's a problem called displacement. So the birds will be potentially displaced from their habitat, particularly when the period of construction occurs, when there's a lot of human presence in a place where there normally isn't. And the birds may be inclined to not go there, to not feed there, or to be otherwise disturbed. Also, they may be distracted by lights. So in terms of migration thrown off, there's a lot of unknowns about what potentially can happen with structures of these size in this area. Someone else, in one of the other presentations I was reading, the noise from the activities to drive the piles into the ground for the turbines is quite loud, and that in of itself could also displace the birds. But overall, the most severe threat to them is the operational life of the wind farm for the collisions. And so the concern that I have is, based on a review of the birds in this, what they call the area of analysis, and what we do know about the potential for the harm to them. But when I went to the BOEM meeting and I inquired as to what was their intention, to put anything in place to alleviate these risks to these birds, and there was no response. It seemed like it wasn't even on the table. So I guess my thinking is that in looking at the Article 7 process, if we're in the position now where we haven't approved anything really, and there's still some time to do a little more planning, I would personally like to know what they're going to do about the birds. Are they going to study them? Because the birds that are going to go down in the ocean are going to get eaten by something or other. They're not going to, we can't count them like the birds in the western part of the country, where you can just count them. These birds are going to be gone, and I'm concerned that we're not going to see the impacts, particularly to things like the red-throated loons and the shearwaters,
that we're not going to see those impacts until it's, a pretty significant hit on the populations. So I did distribute to you this in a letter with the tables. You can see the actual birds. But in closing, I just want to think a little bit about the risks and the benefits of this wind farm. And we just heard about the potential amount of electricity that it's going to produce versus the amount that we need. So that's the benefit. The benefit is it's going to give us some electricity, but the risk is to animal populations that we really don't know quite how to quantify that risk yet. That's a concern.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Patrice.
Thanks, Patrice.
Francis, someone else?
Anyone else want to speak? David?
Try not to kill myself on the way.
Introduce yourself, please.
Good evening. I'm David Gruber. I live in Hardscrabble. I hadn't actually expected to be here this evening, but I was moved to attend, even though Deepwater is not on your agenda, by a conversation I chanced to have this afternoon, just a chance encounter at the business service, with one of the prominent members of the Energy Sustainability Committee. And we sort of fell to talking about this, and I asked this person's view, and she said, well, the town of East Hampton and the trustees have no authority either to approve or disapprove Deepwater Wind. And I said, I agree with that. It's actually up to the Public Service Commission, and the Public Service Law specifically relieves localities of any authority to impose additional conditions. However, in this case, we have some land, some rights to land, easements to cross the beach that Deepwater Wind is interested in acquiring. So the town and the trustees have two different statuses by which they can affect this project. One of them is as a landowner, whether or not the town and trustees grant the easements requested by Deepwater Wind. And the other is as a potential party to the Article 7 proceeding that is required, and is the manner in which the state supersedes all of the local processes and says, we, through the Public Service Commission, are going ultimately to issue or not a certificate of environmental compatibility and public need. That's what it's called. It's the job of the Public Service Commission to weigh the benefits, the costs, and the environmental impacts. So then I said, well, okay. I mean, I've always been led to believe that many people, including members of the Energy Sustainability Committee, who have spoken on behalf of this project, are in fact under the impression that it's important for the town and the trustees to act, lest we forego an opportunity for renewable energy. And yet, you're telling me that you know perfectly well that that's not the case, that whether or not this project goes forward does not turn on the decision of the town or the trustees. I said, so then what's the urgency? And why are you urging the town and the trustees to grant these easements at this time, before any of the environmental processes, before any of the public record has been created? And she said, well, there are two reasons. One of them is that Deepwater needs these easements in order to make its application to the Public Service Commission. That's just flatly untrue. Jeff Bragman, Councilman Bragman, has said that he has spoken to the General Counsel of the Public Service Commission, who told him that not only is that not required, but it's actually pretty rare for an applicant to have acquired necessary rights of way in advance. And he has a memorandum. He's in possession of a memorandum that I think you're aware of, to that very effect. It would be odd for applicants to have acquired all these rights, because in fact, they're obliged under the state law to consider alternative sites. And it would be peculiar if they were required to go around and acquire all the rights to alternative sites, some of which would never be utilized, before making their application. And yet, a lot of the public believes this because of the obfuscation and because this claim has been made repeatedly by Deepwater Wind and by members of the town board. It needs to be debunked. There is absolutely no need for the Deepwater Wind to have obtained these easements in advance of its application, and that actually would be peculiar. The second thing she said to me is that, well, by granting the easements, we gain standing to participate in the Article 7. That's also untrue. In fact, it completely flies in the face of the statute. It's the opposite of what the statute says. The statute says that any municipality through which any portion of the transmission facility is proposed to go has as of right, doesn't have to ask the way the Energy Sustainability Committee did, may we participate? East Hampton, as a municipality through which this facility will go, can participate in the proceeding as a party as of right. It merely has to exercise the right in a timely way. So the notion that giving these easements now is somehow going to enhance the ability of the town to participate is also untrue. And yet, many people in town believe this because they've heard it. They've heard it said by board members more than once. The opposite may actually be the case. It is possible that granting easements and bargaining away the town's participation in advance of the proceeding may actually compromise the town's standing. Whether it does so as a legal formality or not is unclear. But imagine that you're an administrative law judge, and the town of East Hampton or the trustees come before the administrative law judge and say, look, we think this is a problem for thus and so reasons. And he says, well, but you already bargained away what you had to sell for this project. And now you're coming to me to say, well, we don't like the deal we made because we made it ignorantly, and we'd like you to rescue us from what we did. That's not likely to be looked upon with great favor. So the legal justifications for doing this now, they're just nonsense. It's a con job. I can't tell you exactly who's conning whom here, but that we collectively are being conned, that's quite clear to me. The last justification that's been offered is that if we don't take the money now, well, let me just step back for a second and say, this is just a real estate deal. It's not an epic decision about sustainable energy, about Deepwater Wind. It's a simple real estate deal. Somebody who wants to build something wants some rights to make it cheaper for them to do so. They're not asking for those rights because they love us. They're not asking for those rights because they want to give us gifts. They're asking for those rights because it is to their financial advantage to obtain them. I've heard it said, also by town board members, that if we don't make the deal now, in advance of the Article 7 proceeding, we won't get these benefits, we won't get paid. Well, that's the worst bargaining strategy I've ever heard, ever. And I've made a lot of deals in my life. I would like to invite these people over to play poker. I'm going to have a good night. First of all, these people at Deepwater Wind, they are not amateurs. These are not some people who walked in off the street and said, gee, let's make a little deal here. This company is backed by billionaire venture capitalists. Believe me, they know how to make a deal. They know how to bargain, and they know when to bargain to their greatest advantage. They also have all of the information at present, while the town of East Hampton, the trustees, have relatively little of the information. I can tell you, sometimes from bitter experience, that when you go into a negotiation with somebody and they have all the critical information and you don't, the odds that you're going to be the loser are very high. It's happened to me. It's happened to me more than once in my business career, where the person sitting across the table knew what was at stake. For whatever reason, I did not understand clearly what was at stake, and I ended up losing a lot of money for myself and my partners. It's something that you learn the hard way, unfortunately. Forget about all of that. Just as a matter of common sense, Deepwater Wind is the party that is motivating these negotiations now. They're the ones who are saying, we really want to cut this deal with you today, before the Article 7 proceeding. Even common sense ought to tell you that if they're picking the time and place for this negotiation, they're doing it for their advantage, not our advantage. And the notion that if the negotiation happens after the Article 7, it will be worse for us is kind of ridiculous on its face. That if it's worse for us, that means it's better for Deepwater Wind. And why would Deepwater be choosing now to try to cut the deal if it can make a better deal later? That's ridiculous. It's absurd. So you don't really have to scratch the surface, as Mr. McDonald said, very deeply to understand that something's very awry here. We're being asked, you are being asked to do something that flies in the face of common sense. The so-called legal justifications that have been offered are all about nothing. They're false claims, and that can be documented. You know, this is the science of this may be unclear. It may be impossible to determine with certainty what the impacts will be. But whether or not Deepwater Wind requires these easements in order to make its application, that can be determined with certainty. There's no reason on earth why people should be sitting in this town arguing back and forth about whether that is the case. The notion that the town has to grant these easements, or you have to grant these easements in order to have standing in the case, that's not a matter of scientific uncertainty. That can be established with absolute legal certainty. And it should be established with legal certainty. And at that point, it's going to be clear to everyone in this town that what's being asked of you is inappropriate, and the proper thing to do is simply do nothing. You don't need to do anything. The Article 7 proceeding will happen. More will be known by everyone concerned, and when it is concluded, it will be appropriate to make a deal at that time. Finally, the last thing I would tell you is that the reason that Deepwater Wind offers this money is because it's the cheaper alternative. That too should be obvious. People say, oh, well, they can go to Hither Hills, and they don't have to deal with us, they can deal with the state. That's true. Do you not think that if it were cheaper for Deepwater Wind to make the deal with Andrew Cuomo, they would make it? Why would they be standing here asking anything of us if their cheaper alternative were Hither Hills? Now, I don't think that either Hither Hills or Beach Lane are going to move, either get further apart or closer together, or closer or further from the point where Deepwater has to integrate into the grid between now and when the Article 7 is concluded. They're both going to be in exactly the same geographical location. The differential in costs, which may in fact be in the tens of millions, not 8 million, will not change. And if after the Article 7 proceeding it is cheaper for Deepwater Wind to come and ask for easements at Beach Lane, you can be sure that they will be here asking for them. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, David.
I have one comment to make. We had a public hearing some time ago, and we had kept the comments open for 4 weeks after that. Should we still be accepting comments on this subject?
I think it's the public's right to comment, whether we feel that we're accepting them or not. I think the comments made tonight are beneficial.
Mm-hmm.
We have not made any decisions. I don't see any reason why.
I don't either.
Why these things should not be
I
entertained.
also think that since the town board had a meeting the other evening and voted themselves, that this is now, the time for people to come forward and say additional comments that they would like us to be, because we are facing.
But doesn't that opportunity come down the road when we're ready to decide what we're going to do?
I think it's a public.
It does, but
our meeting is public, and I don't mind people coming up and speaking.
I was just
to this issue.
Cows out of the barn on that one.
I understand that, but I'm thinking about our future meetings. Says if we're going to continue to do this every single meeting, why'd we bother having the hearing?
Okay, well.
Well, we had a town meeting with the trustees.
When they put their name down there and you said you could talk, I think we pretty much answered the question.
It's giving us more, it's giving us more information.
This wasn't what I expected.
And it's also a public forum, so.
No, I understand that. I'm just having a conversation with the board to see.
No, I'm perfectly fine with it. I think it's good that people come up. And the town
I think what would be more
vote
important
was
right at this point
pivotal.
is we have other business to conduct.
I agree.
And we should get to that. So it-
Okay. Anybody else
Okay.
to speak?
Anybody else wish to speak? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm sorry, but we neglected to do the roll call when we started, so if you don't mind.
Yeah, so if I can get out of here.
John Aldred,
Yes, here.
Susan Vorpal,
Here.
Jim Grimes,
Yes.
Bill Taylor,
Here?
Francis Bach,
Here.
Rick Drew,
Here.
Brian Burns,
Here.
Susan McGraw-Keeber,
Present.
Del Cullum.
I'm here.
Thank you very much. All present.
Okay, thank you. All right, move on to new business. Roads Committee, we have a complaint about gravel placement at 381 Town Line Road.
Yes, we do.
Inspected?
Susan and I visited the site. Clearly, somebody, we're not exactly sure who, we just have speculation from some of the neighbors, but somebody has clearly gravelled the roadway from Middle Highway, where Town Line turns into Division, south, right?
Right.
South
South and then
to
a flag
which
lot.
goes, quite honestly, maybe 3/4 of a mile before it goes into his driveway, which is a long driveway to the woods, and then splits off into four different
residences.
backwood locations. Now, the whole road is gravelled. The complaints are some of the neighbors on Town Line, as well as the road running parallel called Collingswood. And there's complaints from everything from now vehicles are able to speed through there better. They kind of like the ruts, kind of kept everybody's speed down. A lot of kids walk there, a lot of kids ride their bicycles. It does look like there are a lot of children. Some of the houses have little bikes and toys and stuff outside, so it does look like it is a family-oriented roadway. We didn't speak to the neighbor who made the complaint. She wasn't available. However, her neighbor was, and they were really quite concerned.
Well, hey, Del, did anybody look into, most of these access easements on the trustee roads basically require the recipient of that easement to do certain maintenance. Snow plowing, maintenance of the road is in the hands of the person that has the easement.
In fact, right.
Which is why, Steve Lynch won't accept a lot of these roads. They don't have drainage. The pavement doesn't meet the town's criteria and all. But before we launch, some action against this person, it probably would behoove us to look in and find out that perhaps, I understand that some of the neighbors liked the ruts, but, this guy may very well have gotten a letter from his insurance company that said, hey, you know what? If you want to keep your homeowner's insurance, you have to keep this property accessible in an emergency situation, and sometimes that's up to interpretation, So some people might interpret that as we need to grade the road. Next step might be that we need to harden that surface a little bit with gravel. And I think we probably should feel thankful that maybe the guy didn't think it needed 2 inches of asphalt.
Yeah.
I think we do need to look at the easement for this roadway and the property owners.
Some of the easements.
But also, isn't it relevant that even if somebody wants to or is able to improve the roadway,
That they
if
should
it's
have-
trustee
that they-
road, shouldn't they at least let us know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I think
Absolutely.
I'm really not in a position, because I don't live on the road. I understand some people might not like it, some people do. That happens with just about every decision that is created. However, in this case, my only contention was that they didn't really
But Del,
file any-
you know what, I think that's one of those things. I think if you look at those easements, how they were granted, what the conditions and the language of, it may not have any language in there where they were under any obligation, or it may say they were. And if they were, well, now, there's the issue.
Sure, I understand. Susan, did you?
I'm going to work on that this week.
Okay.
I'm going to get copies of all that this week.
You know, we did mention that, you
And we'll
know,
take a
there
look
was
at
an
it.
option probably for him to make an improvement. And it would be funny why the people,
Because we've had people come in and ask us to petition to the town. You know, the most recent was to petition the town to take over a portion of our ask them if they would be interested in taking over a portion of our trustee things. And, you know, we started down that trail and found out that actually when these people bought their properties, they actually were signing an agreement that it was their responsibility to plow the driveways in the wintertime and to maintain their own access through our owned road. So we'd probably, you know, be a good idea just to find out what the,
But maintaining doesn't necessarily mean laying down a roadway.
well, gravel could be considered maintenance on a moral-based road. I mean, it's arguable.
Yeah, let's take a look at the easement, maybe table it till the next meeting.
Yeah, table it for the next meeting.
Yeah, I'll have all that pulled by next meeting.
Thanks, Susan. Thanks, Bill.
All right. Move on to committee reports, aquaculture, Acabonic Harbor mosquito larvae survey.
Rumor has it you found mosquitoes?
Well, we didn't find many today, actually, surprisingly. Last week, we found a lot. And we found very few. It was pretty consistent. And what we did find were early stage larvae. So it looks like what happened is the last cycle, last week, what was there basically became adults, flew away, and now we're maybe starting another cycle.
In our polygons, with the person that I'm working with, we found, as John said, probably larvae stage 2, a lot of just the shells. So we've assumed that either they were targeted in this particular hot spot zone, and the shells were there. I found really 3.
We found some too. Now, they could have been molds too. Could have been exoskeleton.
But it was very flooded as of last night, and I ask about spraying because each week I report to Acabonic Protection Committee, so they give a report out. And Vector said that because of the high winds, that they were going to hold off on spraying right now and the rain at Great South Bay. So I'm waiting to find out if that means we too will be.
It sounds to me like I agree it wasn't clear what they meant, but it sounded to me like they have bigger fish to fry up in Great South Bay. And since we had very few larvae found, I would be surprised if they sprayed. And because we found mostly early stage larvae, I'd say it's likely they just use BTI.
I would like to say that the northern part of Acabonic, which is where we start, our team of 2, it's almost, that's the polygon 144, and there are several osprey nests along the way, and they're very happy. There's nothing up there. It's really when we get down into 143 and 144 that we have found there are 2 hot spots there.
And those are those little depressions that retain the water.
No, you'd be surprised that there are those pan spots that are just the long spread. Sometimes, most of them, like one of us stays closer to the Phragmites area, uplands, and then I'm a little bit further away, and it was very wet, and there were deep pot, pan and flooded holes.
Pooled holes, yeah.
The mosquitoes are mostly in depressions.
Yes,
Yeah.
but
And they're quite often near the upland.
Yeah, that's where the 2 hot spots were. And there's also a property that Nature Conservancy believes that they might own. And I took some pictures today because they've completely mowed it down and right up into the harbor. So in that mowing, they have little holes along the driveway, and now they're infested. last week there were many of them. But the uplands seem to be where the most mosquito larvae are, and I think that's what they targeted last week. But we're going out every day, getting more sun, doing our job. It's a few hours. We had a reprieve today. We started at 8 because we weren't sure where we were going. We get a call in on Friday if we're going to start Monday. So we got to sleep in an hour late today. And then we do the oysters, the oyster shells.
Right. We moved some oyster shell from the aquaculture nursery to the landfill where it's being stockpiled. So we've got a little pile of oyster shell going.
Nice. And so can people, has the town made any arrangements for people to bring shells in for free
Well,
or anything?
I guess to the dump directly, you mean?
Yeah.
Well, the main deposit at the dump is for scallop shells. So there'll be baymen bringing in scallop shells come scallop season. So we'll have to get the oyster shells out of there first.
I'd also like to mention if anybody's interested in, I believe that a letter was sent to you from Barley for all the trustees. If we're interested in writing a letter to support the grant application that Barley will be making to see about putting the Gann Road nursery together so that it's more convenient.
Right.
So I'm going to write a personal letter because I'm part of the program, and I just put in 1,000 oysters this weekend. I'm very excited with my team partner.
Are you making a motion that the trustees...
I'd like to make a motion.
I'll
Yes.
second that motion.
Thank you.
All in
Everyone
favor?
else in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Just one other quick thing. I was at a Peconic Estuary Program meeting a couple of weeks ago or last week, and there was a presentation made by two people from the DEC, and they're looking at state-owned marshlands. And they're doing a survey there, which basically entails looking at species diversity along like a 50-meter line, evaluating the marsh for its health, in effect, using other parameters. And they've asked for volunteers to, come out and do this with them. So I kind of reached out to them. I haven't heard back, and asked them about, when they may be in East Hampton. I'm assuming they'll be doing the Napeague marshes.
Yeah, I'd be interested in that.
And I said there might be people interested in volunteering for that. So I'll follow up on that and see if they're coming out, and if so, when. I think their period of time they'll be doing it, if I recall correctly, is between August 1st and September 15th, so.
Hopefully it's closer to September 15th.
Yeah, hopefully. I have a feeling we'll be toward the end.
Is there also from Peconic Estuary or Peconic Bay Keeper this weekend, the turtles?
Estuary.
The estuary.
Yeah.
For the
And at
turtles. I think it's
Northwest Landing.
28th?
Yeah, I'm going to try and go to that.
I
Saturday.
signed up, yes, Saturday.
Yeah.
That's also when the LVIS fair is, but
That's at the county park in
Northwest.
Northwest.
I know, it's right around the corner, so I put that on social media if people are interested in going.
Just when you say the county park, is it down by the launching ramp there? Where
I
are they
think
meeting?
it's probably on the other side where the beach, on the Bay Beach around. You walk around the harbor and then over the
Park by the
hill.
ramp.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
It's a long walk, isn't it?
Not really.
Also, this week is Shell It Out Hampton. It's the annual fundraiser for the shellfish hatchery. Is this one?
This weekend? I don't think it's this weekend.
It is.
The annual, let me say, Shell It Out. I think it wasn't it this Wednesday, or am I mistaken? Buy tickets. Sorry, it's in September. I'm an early bird.
Shell It Out
I already
is a
bought my
great
tickets.
event,
Okay.
but it's not this Wednesday.
No, it's 9:15. 9:15. Okay, sorry, I'm a little early.
Yeah, excited.
Okay.
Thanks for that.
Georgia Ponds Committee, notice of East Hampton Village ZBA hearing of EEA, ACA, and AJAR Family Limited Partnerships for variances to construct a swimming pool, retaining wall, and fencing at 81 Ocean Avenue, fronting Hook Pond.
When's the hearing date? I thought it already was for a year. It was 2 weeks ago.
July 13th, yep. Missed it. Application of Clifford Ross for Phragmite control at 4147 Cove Hollow Road, Georgia.
This is a cutting permit or excavation?
It's on cutting, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think, isn't this a Bruce Horwath thing? I thought that's who handled
This is
that.
Bruce, yes.
Yeah, all right.
Bruce isn't
Now, is
here.
that just, is it a renewal or a new permit? Because I thought he had a permit on
New
that.
permit. I don't think we've ever had it for that property.
Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't say anything
She's
about
been cutting that stuff there.
Well, there's, you know what it is? I think there's a couple different lots there. Maybe he's just adding to what he was already cutting.
I don't have a copy of that. Jim, do you have a copy?
Yes.
All right.
So we got to go down there and take a
You
look
guys will
anyway.
take a look at it.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Do you want to call Bruce maybe tomorrow? We could look at it.
Should we give him a shot?
Thank you.
You can't have it.
Do you have it?
Yeah, I gave him mine.
Okay, because I got it here.
All right, so we'll meet with Bruce, right, Jim?
Yeah.
And do a walkthrough.
All right. Table, this was on 7/13. All right, harbor management, Acabonic.
I'm sorry.
Sure.
Can I, one beach thing I forgot to bring
Oh,
up
okay.
real
Yep,
quick.
sure.
The East Hampton Town Beach, the stewardship, Adopt a Beach program. There was one thing I missed. Maybe because I thought we could do it, but when it was brought up to me as a question, I realized it was probably a little much to put on the secretary at the office. And I agree 100%, and I hope everyone else with. And that would be the responsibilities of the trustees as part of the adopted program. 2 items. 1, providing gloves, sticks, trash bags, and safety information. I think, you know, when I deal with my community service workers that I'm appointed through the court system, I make them get their own stuff. I mean, I don't make them. I ask them to. And I've never had a problem. Like, I'll take an hour off their time if they go out and buy a box of garbage bags, okay? This, I think, should be a request to them to, you know, bring your own garbage bag. In fact, I'd like to, maybe if we get this on the website, I'd like to try to maybe suggest that people start using those burlap bags, those reusable bags.
Yeah, make a list of suggested
You know,
equipment
it really
you
is
need.
easy. I used to
mean
not
the
dig them,
trustee
but
bag,
now I
right?
use them a lot, and it really saves all the garbage bags.
The
I used
trustee
to
bags,
use.
you mean?
You know,
The
I've used
Hampton Town
I've used the
trustee
clam bag. I've used the
clam bags.
trustees' clam bags, but really a burlap sack. You can
Okay.
get them at a hardware store, and you bring them to the dump, and you dump them out, and you can wash them if they get spilled
Because
on.
I use the
and-
trustee bags.
So Del, could we make a suggestion that when you sign up, you get a recommended list of items you need to procure? So you're suggesting what they need, but they actually take care of getting it.
Yeah, I think if we struck that, which I already did, I sent her a revised copy, and I hope I did, but I didn't get it. She didn't print it out. I have the old one. I think if we just strike that, people that are signing up to do it will realize that they need to get their own material. If they don't, they're going to ask us, where do we get bags? Well, then we can, you don't mind simply
And
telling
also,
them.
we were going to be picking up the trash for them.
Or we can add it. And the other one is, facilitating removal. I don't think, you know, I don't think we need to be responsible for that. I think if they're going to pick up the trash, especially if they're going far on the beach where they're probably going to have a vehicle, they can just throw it in the back of their vehicle. Until there's a problem, or if one arises, which I don't anticipate, I'd like to ask the board to strike those 2 things off this.
Yeah, hey, Del, where are they bringing the garbage to then?
Well, they can bring it to the dump.
Okay.
Is there a charge for what they're bringing?
There is.
Because if there is, we could
You know-
probably have it waived.
Yes. Again, you know, I'm assuming that the people that sign, it's an assumption, I shouldn't, but that the people that sign up are going to have, that are going to be residents, and they're going to have stickers. But maybe we can maybe make a...
Generally, it's basically like household trash that they're picking up. We're not talking about...
It's not construction debris.
Oyster shells.
Nothing that they're going to
Special
wait for.
construction debris.
Right, yeah.
Yep. Okay.
There's also somebody, well, one of the normal people that cleans up Georgia Beach really gathered a huge pile of what appears to be maybe fisherman equipment. It's a big piece of a net. It's some monofilament. It's some wood. It has hardware in it, floated up. This is all coming from the ocean. They managed to drag it to the mean high tide mark, and they can't do anything. I went to go look at it. I can't even budge this stuff. My back just says, do it, and you're going down. So I told her I would bring it up here. If I was able to lift it myself, I'd take the trustee truck out there and do it. Problem is I can't lift this stuff. It's really heavy.
Is it in the village or the town?
It's in the village. Yeah, it's between.
So maybe we
Jetty
can-
two
Possible
and
to
three.
get
Parks Department?
Yeah, well, I think village
Right,
parks
village.
would probably cooperate on that, you know? It's in their interest, it's in their way.
How far down is it? Like halfway between?
I'll tell you exactly where it is. I'll tell you, she told me, and I can tell you. I mean, I know where it is. I just don't know what you call it. She calls it, we didn't pick up the rate of the third.
Is it east or west of Georgia Beach?
Okay. Two huge heavy piles just beyond the third jetty at Georgia Beach.
It's right on the pond.
Just beyond the third jetty. And then she wrote me a second thing and said, very, very heavy. We didn't pick up all the way to the third jetty. So,
It's by Georgia Pond.
Yeah, it's right by the pond.
it looks pretty big. It looks like you won't miss it. It's very colorful.
Oh, it's
Blue,
huge.
yellow.
So and it's attached to a log as well? That's a horrible...
Yeah, there's sticks in
Del,
there.
could you forward the photo?
Yeah, it's big.
I'm
Can
sorry?
you forward the photo to
I
the
absolutely
trustees so
will.
that...
Is it something that looks like it'll have to be picked up with a machine?
You know what? The way I looked at if they break it apart, if they pick it up in pieces, it's just, there's pieces of metal in there. It's all sorts of stuff, buoys, everything. So if it can be broken apart, maybe.
Pass it around.
If it's a ball of twine and net, it's going to be awful hard to break it apart.
Yeah, it doesn't look like it. And when I just looked at it, played with it, took some pictures, it's just one big
Dragger net or something with a chain bottom or something.
Yeah.
It seems like worst comes to worst, maybe we could ask the guys that open the gut to lift it into the truck in October.
Well, let's see what Park says.
Look at that. Actually, it's kind of nice. You know, Susan, it looks
You
an
can
awful
make a
lot like
t-shirt.
that T-shirt.
I was just going to say, here it comes.
You know? And you know, you may want to think about adding some green into that because it does
Well,
show
I
off
was
the
just
other
gonna ask
colors
Del,
pretty
look,
good.
It's not debris, it's art. I'm going to use it for my
You
next
know,
project.
what color were you planning on making those T-shirts? You may want to think about green.
Yes, that's the next topic
With the
coming up,
balloon back.
education. I
What
have,
a nice
Yeah,
lead-up.
I bet, yeah.
Does Billy Strong want it?
I'm sorry?
Does Billy Strong want it?
Yeah, Bill. I didn't ask him.
yeah, it is.
Okay.
Speaking of which, today I dragged a Mylar balloon on my vest all the way through the marshes, and I took a picture of it, and I intend to put it up and say, here, this is why. I do no more Mylar. It says Happy Mother's Day, and I'm thinking this is, you know, strangling all these lovely little birds. So anybody watching who's getting Mylar or balloons, please think twice.
Okay, so
Are we at the
segue
education?
into education and the
perfect.
Rise Some Fun.
The Rise Some Fun Scholarship, and we are, Lori, thank you very much, Lori Miller-Carr, we are trying to get this final design done, which is almost there, right, Arlene?
Yes.
And we need to create a budget for the T-shirts, so I'm coming to the trustee board and asking if we might be able to come up with a budget to determine how many T-shirts and maybe sweatshirts, if we have money, we can make.
What's, like...
The company is what Lori has used in the past for the clamshell.
Yeah.
A clam
How many
contact.
units do they typically, like, what's the price points on the, on the volume?
That I don't know because we haven't gotten beyond
Is it
that.
custom made?
It's a company that Lori has used for the clam
You
T-shirts.
get the largest clam T-shirts.
If it's the one that you had the picture of, custom ink,
Yes.
it's 100, is the...
Is that what they like to see?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, I think that's how you're going to end up.
I mean, you can get less than 100, but 100
Okay,
will
I
get
don't
you
have it
the
yet
first
because we
good
needed one
price
more thing
break.
to ask them
Pretty
before we could
reasonable.
actually finalize it. But, and I've also contacted, I thought it was Lauren Bolger, but it's not. She gave me the name of 2 people to contact for the Fisherman's Fair to put a tent up, and I understand that we have a little tent to construct
Pop-ups.
and a pop-up tent? Okay, so I'll see how much that is, unless someone here knows. And I'd like to ask the board if you are in agreement that we do the Fisherman's Fair, and I would run that, and if anyone would like to help out during the day, I would be happy to help.
What's the date of that?
I think it's August 11th. It's coming up really fast.
Susie, should we make maybe a motion to order 100 T-shirts, and then we'll have a couple of events that you're going to sell them at?
Yes, and
You
also
said
the
3
big
events?
clam contest, we'll sell them there as well.
Are you making a motion?
I'm making a motion,
I
yes.
second the motion.
For the budget, for the T-shirts.
Yep.
Well, we'll do the 100, I guess.
And then for the Fisherman's Fair, I don't know how much that costs to put a tent up, but should I come back to you with a price?
No,
Just do it.
those two are just...
Okay.
So we'll make a motion for both the T-shirt budget for 100 T-shirts and then for the budget for
Are
Fisherman's
these
Fair.
mixed sizes?
We're going to divide up the
You have
sizes.
to, yeah, you have a list of
100 and
sizes.
up?
Right.
Yeah.
We'll do them for kids, we'll do them, I understand that extra large
Yeah, and
sells
that's
the
just-
most,
And then we'll reorder if they sell.
Yeah.
It's a test market.
sell more,
1,
okay.
2, 2, 1, 1 small, 2
And
medium,
I do
2
have a
large,
commitment
1
tonight.
extra large.
Yeah.
I'll ask you.
1, 2, 2, 1.
I have a question, commitment this evening that each one of you will buy one. I'll make a motion that everyone here will buy a T-shirt.
I'm in.
Probably several people.
Okay.
Is 100 shirts going to be enough?
Is 100 shirts enough?
I would
don't know.
suggest, do your 100. If
See
you
how they
need them,
come out.
reorder.
Oh,
I've done
yeah,
that.
we-
I don't know
I've
how
done
long
this
it takes
stuff
for-
before where I overcommitted.
I'll be
Hundreds
fine
of
for the
large shirts.
fishermen?
I did it,
Yeah.
I
Okay,
still
so-
have 40.
Yeah. We have a motion on the
Can
table.
we do this? There's a
All right.
motion to order 100 shirts and take a spot at the Fisherman's Fair.
I thought Jim,
You seconded?
Yes.
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Harbor Management, macroalgae bioextraction project application received and permit issued.
oh, excuse me, I'm sorry. The Flupsies, we never waived the fees. We waived it for 3 Mile Harbor Marina, but we didn't for Sunset Cove and,
I think we should,
Lions
if
Head
we've
Beach.
established policy, I think we
Okay.
should waive the fees on these.
I'll make that.
you seconded, who seconded? Rick? Okay, great.
My understanding, Acabonic.
Aye.
Yeah, right. That Acabonic thing, that's done. We voted to approve it, they got their permit, it's signed, it's done.
I think we're just letting you know that the permit was issued.
Yeah. We did. We voted to approve it, subject to the application coming in, which did come in. I think it's a good idea. We know that it's in.
All right. Roads Committee, Trustee Roads.
I don't think we have anything further, unless I'm mistaken.
We have a few follow-ups on Merchants Path.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and Chris and Susan are, I think, going to
Yeah.
clean that up this week.
We'll clean that up. And there's also another issue there that I just noticed today, looking at one of the maps that I spoke to Rick about before the meeting, that I'll talk to you about, and maybe we should coordinate a visit.
Okay. Where are we with that? I mean, it seems,
On the Merchants Path?
yeah.
Well, I think Chris was absent from the last meeting, so we're catching up to
Okay.
complete the contact
He's going to
with
catch up and,
the homeowners.
Okay.
We're going to sit down
To let
this
them
week.
know.
By the next meeting, we should have some real good progress. So I
Okay.
apologize, we haven't gotten there yet, but
Just
hoping to have a lot
there's
of
no
progress.
fire between then and now. We'll worry about that.
It's going to take a while to get that whole
Yeah, I
thing
know.
straightened out.
Well, we're in a wet spell now.
Yeah, that's true.
All right. 3 Mile Harbor, Request from Dennis Cole of Cole Environmental Services on behalf of Richard Williams Jr., 3 and 5 Outlook Road to close out their bulkhead permit, bulkhead replacement trustee permit.
I think,
T417.
I think Lori sent them a letter telling them they need to supply as-built survey and final photographs.
And then we can go down there and take a look at it.
All right. And then it should be closed out.
Good.
We'll move on to administrative. Payment of the bills. Edson International, $116.50 for pump-out boat parts. Norrocky Smith, $8,000 for the financial audit for the year ending December 31st, 2017. North Fork Water Supply, $70.40. Excuse me. Riverhead Building Supply, $652.67 for materials to build the Gerard Drive kayak racks.
I'd like to make a motion, we pay the bills.
Second,
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Minutes, June 25th, 2018. Anybody review them?
Yes, I did.
Did you find them in order?
I found them in order. Found them in order. I might have added something, I'm not sure at the moment, but everything else looked perfectly fine, and Arlene did a great job.
Do you want to make a motion?
Oh, make a motion to approve.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
July 9th.
Same?
I did the same, I read them, and I think I might have put in one small item.
When you say that, is it like a grammar thing?
No, I only put in factual things that occurred that maybe were overlooked.
Well, we would need to know that.
You should read the change.
Yeah,
if
read
you
the
could, please.
change.
Oh, John Aldred reads them too, and Lori Miller Carr, so they go through a thick scrutiny for grammar.
Well, this is not a grammar issue. So, but, that's okay. But going forward, if you make a change, just let us know.
Highlight it and read it.
Yep.
Oh, well, it might have been
I'm
my own.
sorry,
And here,
yes.
it may have been this, that I asked for Kim Shaw, the Director of Natural Resources for the town of East Hampton, and Nicole Mayer of Nature Conservancy to come and speak at a town trustee meeting with regard to the mosquito larvae, because both of them have experience. And at least Kim said that she would not be available until after August, but she would gladly come in. And Nicole, I think, will come in when...
She hasn't found a date yet.
Right. So it would be nice maybe to have them, every other week. But I think that was... Yes, because Kim, I was unaware that she had been, she had worked on this for 20 years before she became the Director of Natural Resources. So I thought it might be interesting for us to have more knowledge brought to the trustees. So I think I inserted that. That was me.
Yeah, but again, you don't want to, and it's not a reflection on you, you don't want to insert something after the fact. You know what I mean? Like as an add-on. That
It either happened or it didn't.
That's not reflective of the actual minutes, but what happened. If somebody said something that, or it was written that it was incorrect, and you changed it because you were there, that's different.
Well, this came after, just so you can see, it came, prior to that, previous paragraph was John Aldred reported on the progress of Acabani carpet mosquito larvae. So I added this because this was also part of that conversation.
Yeah, I think it's just appropriate to report it to the board, and the board votes to approve it.
Fine.
You make a
Thank you for
motion.
sharing, thank you
All
for
right,
sharing
so-
that,
Yeah.
Are you making a motion?
I'm okay.
So I'll make a
with your addition.
I'm making a motion to have you approve the addition of the invitation to Kim Shaw and
Yep.
Dr.
I'll
Nicole Mayer.
second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
So going forward, just so I understand this, when I do read the minutes and I have something to insert or add to this particular paragraph, a particular paragraph, I should send it to all of you first for approval via email.
You can mention
Yeah,
it.
well, that's not really, guys, hey,
bring it
that's
up
not
at the meeting. You don't
part
have to make
of the minutes. Okay, the minutes are really there to document the history of the meeting. If you have an idea afterwards, it can go in the next meeting's minutes. But I don't think.
Well, this wasn't an idea. I had already
Okay.
announced it at this meeting,
Okay,
but this was there.
as long as it's part of the meeting record.
Yeah, I'm sorry. This was
Because we've
not
had that where somebody
after
came back and said, that's not what I meant.
It was left out.
It was left out. It was an omission.
So
That's
if
what I
something is left out, you want me to?
That's different.
Send it to you again?
Well, I think just bringing it up at the approval
Just what you did
process
is
is
perfect.
fine.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Financial reports, June 30th, 2018. Anybody have a chance to review?
Apparently not.
Okay, we'll
Table
table
it.
that. And we need a renewal of a certificate of
I'd like to
deposit.
make a motion for renewal on this.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. May I interject one thought about the pump-out bill? It's not about the bill itself, but this weekend when I planted my 1,000 oyster seedlings, Bob Calder was there. He was working with someone else with their set of oysters, and he introduced himself and said that he's one of the pump-out boat operators, and that he is suggesting that a new boat be purchased. So I thought I would pass that along. I asked him to come to the meeting tonight.
That's nice.
And
My guys
to
come to me all the time and tell me I should
Well,
buy some new trucks.
I said I would mention it, and I invited Mr. Calder to attend the meeting tonight and professionally explain why he thought that we needed a brand-new boat.
Well, it would be more appropriate if, I think we should committee the operators came in.
Yes, and I think that Susan, you're on the pump-out committee. Who else?
And we can start to take a look at, what that entails.
Yeah, so
We've always
I'd like
felt, we've always felt that
Okay.
a second pump-out boat would be helpful in Montauk, but they're like $100,000.
Yeah, but you
there
gotta
are
look
grants
at,
You gotta look at grant opportunities and stuff, too.
So however that needs to be
committee
handled,
project.
the pump-out boat committee people, if you would like to reach out to Mr. Calder and maybe have him come in and
Did they
personally.
make out okay at the fireworks?
Yes.
Was there any issues?
No, they didn't get as much activity as they had hoped. But it's great that the presence is there. I think it is an educational opportunity.
Yeah, I
as
heard
well
it,
for
I
them.
heard it advertised that the trustees, the boats were going to be there.
I heard it advertised too, but they gave the closing time of 5:30, I think it was.
Did they? Oh, I didn't hear
We
that.
had, we had asked it to be late. Well, we did, but it didn't make it into that particular advertisement I heard on the radio.
Is there any reason why we even let all the boats in the harbor? Why can't they just
We can't
stay
keep
out
them
in the
out.
bay?
We have the right
And
to
then
come
we
into
don't
the
have the
harbor.
whole issue of closing the harbor to the
Yeah,
shell
but
fishermen.
they have the rights of navigation. Right.
Yeah, that's a tricky issue, Susan.
Yeah, but if it's for the health of the harbor versus somebody's enjoyment, when they can enjoy it outside the harbor.
Well, I think that the way to do that would be to move the fireworks to the edge of the bay rather than keep the fireworks
It's
in
not
the
like
harbor.
it's
keep
not
the
like
boats
you
out.
can't, you don't have to be right underneath them to see
You
them.
could also provide,
I
like
don't think you
tablets
can
for the
keep a boat
septic.
from coming in the
Anybody
inlet.
with a
If you
big boat,
discharge,
in a
it
sense,
puts
would
out a
stay
blue
outside the
streak or
harbor and look at them over Sammy's Beach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's afraid.
But there's a weather difference, too. There's a water, choppiness difference. and
Yeah.
stuff
They're very-
between outside and inside.
That's a question that we have to ask. Are the pump-out boats reaching their
Are they that old?
old or,
First one is. Well, again, I think the committee should
Committee,
start to
yeah.
dig into this, and then we can
Get back to
have a
it.
better discussion.
All right.
All right, report of the clerk. As you're all aware, we got a new draft proposal from Deepwater Wind on a lease and benefits package. I'd like to appoint a committee to investigate finding an attorney to review that.
I would definitely second that motion.
All in favor? Okay, now, let's choose the committee.
The Harbor Management Committee has been active in reviewing the Deepwater Wind project over the past year and almost a half now, so I think that's a logical core. We have a 3-member committee, and we could have guest trustees participate as needed to either fill a spot or
I would very
cover.
much like to serve on that committee.
So,
I don't think, in fairness to you, Rick, I don't think you could categorize a trustee that wants to be involved as a guest trustee. You know, this is a bigger issue than
Fair
just,
enough, Brian.
yeah, the
Thank you
harbor.
for-
Yeah, no problem, no problem.
That's a bad choice of
I think
words,
what-
but I didn't know if it was
what
going to be
Rick-
one
I-
full-time person or it was going to be a platooning, so to speak, of members.
I think to maintain continuity, it should be made up of, we discussed this, a 4-member board.
Yeah.
That way, because if you've got people drifting in, drifting out to add their 2 cents, I think what it does do is I think it takes away from the efficacy of the committee.
And there'll be
Well, I think
communication with the rest of the
Susan's-
board.
Susan's
Susan.
experience in real estate is probably appropriate for this also.
Yeah. So can we have Rick, Jim, John,
And Susan.
Oh, make a motion,
with
and we
that, sure.
appoint them?
You making a motion?
Yeah. make a-
Thank you
Do
for
we have a
doing
second?
that.
Do we have a second on that
I'll
committee?
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all I have right now, except I could throw in the fact that we closed Georgia Pond this weekend because of the blue-green algae
Yeah.
bloom.
Dr. Goldberg, I believe, commented, or someone commented that the fact that we did not get the harvester working, you know, at the normal
May have
time
it- may
might be a
have had
contributing
some-
factor.
yeah.
Yeah.
I read it too, yeah.
Also, Wainscot Pond is closed.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, but I mean,
The Wainscot
Yeah,
Pond
but the
is like,
public doesn't have access to that, so
Well,
it's,
just
the
mention it as a
homeowners
fact.
need to be aware of
That
that.
happened first.
I have a question, unrelated. The issue of the fence at Baby Beach that was going to be extended,
Yep.
is there a status on that?
Reaching out to the guy who did the
The
kayak
contractor,
racks.
Chris
Get into it.
Hamilton, and
So I'll
Francis.
get a estimate from
yeah.
him and then pass it out.
it's pretty, I'll tell you what, have you tried to drive anything into the ground down
Oh, I know,
there?
yeah, we were going to do
What I
it
was-
last year. You need
What
a-
I was
and-
gonna suggest, I'll donate it. If he needs an auger, I'll get in and auger the holes for him.
Okay,
for the
great.
fence.
thanks, Jim.
All right.
Because I tell you what, that'd be one of those things where the guy throws a number out to you.
And he's still there 2
Yeah.
weeks later on
I'm
the
gonna have
first
trouble-
hole.
I'm gonna have trouble getting him to build any more kayak racks
Right.
after that.
All right. And
Feel like he was set up.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
I have one more thing
Go ahead,
on the algae bloom. Now, we have, one of the baymen has crab traps in there, and he's resisting removing them.
In Georgia?
Yeah, and reports I've seen show that you should not be eating crabs out of a pond that's been contaminated. I don't know if we have any way to force him to take it out. There's no town ordinance on it. There doesn't seem to be a state or county ordinance on it. The only thing we have is our bottom.
Well, I think it might be prudent for us to request, because unless there's some documentation that says, hey, the shellfish, somebody will certify those crabs, that even though they're taken from contaminated waters, that the crabs themselves are clean. I would be afraid that if something happens
Well, what's our
resulting in
liability
this.
on that?
What's that?
What's our
liability? We issued the permit. We
Right.
gotta put the.
Yeah, but we posted, Jim.
Yeah, but hang on.
I think we should
Can I
send
tell
a
you
letter
what? There's a
to
fine
the-
line, there's a
to the
real
homeowner
fine
directly,
line
Well, it's
alerting
not a
them.
homeowner,
Between-
it's a commercial bayman.
fishermen.
Well, then,
Between-
directly to the fishermen,
I think it's
alerting the
probably
fishermen.
a common sense thing. Pull your traps out of there and wait this
Maybe
out.
Chris could send a letter on our behalf for the trustees.
Is a trustee permit involved?
He
I don't think
suggested
so.
he had a place to bring them to a Dr. Valenti, who would keep them cultivated. It's a cleaner system.
Is that the North Shore
We're not in a
veterinarian?
position to say that that's,
We're not in the aquaculture
No.
business
Okay.
right now.
Bob Valente.
What is he using it, what is he using the,
he thinks that if you take them to Valenti, he puts them in one of his
Filter it
pools,
out.
and for a certain amount of time, they'll filter
Yeah,
out.
clams, they
These
do.
aren't
I think we
clams.
should, I think there should be a letter sent to this individual so that he's made aware of, that the trustees are, you know, we're on the record as letting him know that these are contaminated, and we do, and then they should not be consumed.
Yes,
And
50
I'm,
trucks.
I'm okay with the letter. I think a little more proactively, maybe in the future, the permit can be subject to the provisions that you guys would, you know, you would not be fishing during
I'm
the
not even
months
sure
in
we
which the
actually
pond
issue
is
a
not.
permit.
What's that?
I don't think we actually issue a permit to these guys.
Oh, I thought there was.
We issued one permit to Richard Lester, we issued one permit, but that's the only permit we've issued, so I don't know.
See the person you're talking about?
Richard removed his traps.
Richard removed his traps a month ago.
No, it's not, Richard. What do we issue a permit for? Crab traps on the bottom?
Fish traps,
Fish traps.
not horseshoe crab.
There are
Not
other
crab
traps other than blue claw
Yeah, yeah,
crab traps
I
in
know.
the pond.
well, is
And these
there,
are crab traps.
Yes.
this is a little
We don't issue
draconian, but do we want to revoke the permit based on the fact that
There
the
is no
waters are
permit.
There is
contaminated?
no permit
We
on it.
haven't issued a permit to this individual.
Oh,
So we have an
then-
enforcement issue,
Right.
not only because he doesn't have a permit, because it's hard to, it's also.
But there's no regulations,
Right.
is the point.
We contacted the DEC and the shellfish, you know, they, you know, crabs are not considered shellfish, so they don't regulate them.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I'll look into it. I don't know what the right maneuver is going to be, but let's, maybe I'll look into it with the, whatever appropriate committee.
I mean,
We
if you're going to
checked
send a
with the
letter, it
Department
might
of
be just a
Health.
letter, you know, from the board
They said to call the DEC.
suggesting this, that might
Yeah.
be
We
said to
strong
call
enough to
crustacean people.
press
They said
on
they only
him
did
the
horseshoe crabs.
seriousness of the issue. But if we don't have any, you know, standing to force anything.
but at least we're warned,
Well,
because if
again,
there is,
we do own the bottom,
That's
so
it, they only regulate.
I think we can evict somebody if we really have to, but I don't know how to do that.
I think it's incumbent upon
Why don't we
us.
start with a letter?
Alert this person.
I think a letter is a good starting point, Chris.
After 50.
Let them know there is a health issue potentially associated with this, and, you know, we'd like to discuss this further.
Guy's got a commercial fish.
And I think Brian's got a good idea that now that we know that blue-green algae is a recurring potential problem in Georgia, we should
Out here, so-
rethink what we're allowing in there.
Yeah, how you
not
administer
allowing
it.
in there, under what conditions we're allowing.
It was actually Chris, but I'll take credit for it.
That's a good point.
All right.
Well, maybe we can work with Town of East Hampton in the future on some enforcement. I don't know if they would have the Marine Patrol or whoever would, you know, if we work together so that if it's closed for fishing during certain months each year, that might be a good proactive solution.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we don't really have the enforcement power that they have.
Yeah, I think we should discuss how we have to handle it.
I'll start with a letter, and we'll continue the conversations on what to do in the future.
Okay. And the last thing we have is the Peconic Estuary Program upcoming events, the Terrapin Turtle Monitoring on July 28th, and you said that's down northwest
Northwest Harbor.
County Park.
That's what, 10 or 11 o'clock?
I don't have the time on this.
I have it.
During the day?
11 to 1, I think.
It's in my,
I
I post these things for people if they want to go.
I'm not sure about that. I have
I got really interested in
try to
these
keep
things, doing the
public, you
horseshoe
know,
crabs. Man, we came across like
Right?
a bunch of them one night.
Terrapins?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. we
I
have-
just want
we
to,
saw- I think we
I
saw
just
one.
wanted to ask if something
Oh, no,
was,
man, I saw-
we needed to
saw
discuss
friggin'
something about that Georgia issue with the security guard. Do we need to discuss any of that?
I don't know.
I mean, I went with Marine Patrol, and I don't know if you guys want some
My
information or not.
understanding, it was taken care of and straightened out.
Okay.
I mean, that's my understanding.
I mean, it was when I was there with the officer, there really, he wasn't, the guy wasn't stopping anybody.
Well,
So,
my understanding was they hired a new security firm, and they kind of like overstepped their,
is that what happened?
that's what.
I mean, he was sitting in the middle of the beach. It wasn't like he was up closer to the property. He was in the middle of the beach.
Where was this?
But he wasn't stopping people. He was just telling them, you can't park here. You can pass up here, you can pass down here. It didn't matter. But
That's
some-
happened before.
There is a
Yeah,
parking
yeah.
problem down there now,
Yeah.
because it's supposed to park on the trustee parcel.
And the plover
And the
fences
plover
are still up.
fencing is taking up a large portion of that.
Yeah. But that should be coming down soon.
They should flex.
Real soon.
Yeah, I was down there Saturday, there was no signs up.
There wasn't.
Nobody was obstructing. Went down there to put the include the analogy.
Well, the sign said, the sign that he had in the middle of the
I
beach
saw a
said,
photograph of it. That
vehicles
wasn't-
not
yeah.
permitted.
Yeah,
Yeah, it
no
was not-
vehicles
that
beyond
wasn't
this
there
point or
Saturday.
something.
Right. Oh, it was there when we were there, but it was way off in the dunes, laying against a chair. Yeah, it all seemed to be okay. I mean,
Okay, great. Do I have a motion to close?
Motion to close.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
I'm trying to find this. It's- yeah.